not be the same. Few people laughed. Few people cried. Most people were silent. I remembered the line from the Hindu scripture, the Bhagavad Gita. Vishnu is trying to persuade the prince that he should do his duty, and to impress him takes on his multi-armed form and says, "Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds." I suppose we all thought that one way or another.
That was a confession. When this man, Julius Robert Oppenheimer, the father of nuclear weapons, spoke after witnessing his own creation flatten the city of Hiroshima just one day earlier. The birth of nuclear weapons marked a significant chapter in human history. It affected the survival of the world, both at that moment and forever after. So what do we actually know about this deadly weapon? Or what do we know about the man who created it? It was a normal day in Hiroshima. Citizens in one of Japan's busiest industrial cities were preparing for a new workday. It was 8:15 a.m. on August 6, 1945. Nothing seemed unusual until an American strategic bomber flew over the city. From an altitude of 9,400 meters, a large black object fell and exploded. At 580 meters above the ground, in the blink of an eye, a second sun was born. The massive fireball burned even hotter than the real sun. It expanded up to 2 kilometers from the center of the explosion. Everything within a 2-kilometer radius was reduced to nothing, vanished without a trace. Homes, vehicles, air, water, money, animals, and people all became nothing. At that very moment, the sky over Hiroshima lost all color. No one could see anything except the terrifying light from the bomb. It immediately caused temporary blindness. But that wasn't even the scariest part. The shockwave from the bomb tore through the air, creating blazing winds and thermal waves hot enough to destroy everything within a radius of more than 10 kilometers. Water boiled and evaporated. Buildings and trees burned. Even the water inside human bodies vanished in an instant. A massive shockwave spread faster than the speed of sound, flattening the entire city. All of it formed this now iconic mushroom cloud. And the man who brought this monster into the world was him, Julius Robert Oppenheimer, the father of the atomic bomb, born on April 22, 1904, into a Jewish family. His father, Julius Oppenheimer, was a wealthy textile importer who immigrated from Germany to the US in 1888. His mother, Ella Friedman, was a painter who came to America with nothing, no degree, and no knowledge of English. He also had a younger brother named Frank, who later became a physicist and supported his work significantly. In that era, the Oppenheimers were considered an upper-middle-class family with means. In 1912, the family moved to an 11th-floor apartment at 155 Riverside Drive, Manhattan, a neighborhood known for its luxury landmarks and modern homes. In addition, the family owned a highly valuable art collection. It included works by Pablo Picasso, Edouard Vuillard, and at least 3 original paintings by Vincent van Gogh. With a strong family foundation and a brilliant mind, it's no surprise that Oppenheimer studied at a prestigious school. He was a gifted student, interested in literature, English, French, and above all, mineralogy. He completed grades 3 and 4 within 1 year and skipped half of 8th grade. In his final year of high school, Oppenheimer and his remarkable intellect turned to science, and he committed to it. But fate never gives anyone everything. Though a genius, Oppenheimer started college at Harvard a year late, at age 18, majoring in chemistry after developing colitis during a family vacation in Zagreb while surveying minerals. Besides chemistry, Harvard required him to study history, literature, and either philosophy or math. He made up for the late start by taking 6 courses per term and was inducted into the Phi Beta Kappa Honor Society. In his first year, he was granted permission to audit graduate-level physics classes thanks to a self-study program, which allowed him to skip foundational courses and go straight into advanced ones. And this was where the bringer of death was born. In one course taught by a notable professor, physics found its way to Oppenheimer, almost by chance. In 1924, Oppenheimer was admitted to Christ's College at the University of Cambridge. He wrote a letter to Ernest Rutherford requesting to work at the Cavendish Laboratory. Friedman wrote a recommendation letter stating that Oppenheimer's clumsiness in the laboratory revealed that his strength did not lie in experimentation, but in theoretical physics. He was a tall, thin man, a heavy smoker, and often skipped meals during periods of intense concentration. Oppenheimer often caused concern among friends due to his tendencies towards self-destructive behavior. A disturbing incident occurred during Oppenheimer's vacation in Paris when he visited his friend Francis Ferguson. Ferguson noticed Oppenheimer was unwell and, to ease his worries, told him that he was soon to be married to his girlfriend, Frances Kelly. Oppenheimer did not take the news well. He lunged at Ferguson and attempted to strangle him. Although Ferguson easily pushed his friend away, the incident convinced him that Oppenheimer was truly struggling with serious psychological issues. Throughout his life, Oppenheimer experienced bouts of depression, and he once confided to his brother that he needed physics more than he needed friends. After years of strenuous study and training, in March 1927, at the age of 23, Oppenheimer received his PhD. His name appeared in numerous journals, recognizing many significant contributions to the emerging field of quantum mechanics. Like many others, after completing his studies, Oppenheimer began a career in teaching and deeper scientific research. Perhaps the most crucial aspect he brought to teaching was his extraordinary intuition. Oppenheimer always knew where the important problems lay, as seen in his choice of research topics. He lived with those problems, striving for answers, and shared his passions with his research group. At his peak, Oppenheimer had about 8 to 10 graduate students in his group, in addition to around 6 postdoctoral researchers. He met with this group daily in his office to discuss each student's research progress. They could cover topics like quantum dynamics, microcosm, electron pair creation, and nuclear physics, all in a single afternoon. Oppenheimer made significant discoveries in theoretical astrophysics, particularly in general relativity and nuclear theory. Nuclear physics, spectroscopy, and quantum field theory expanded into quantum electrodynamics. He was also interested in the mathematical formalism of relativistic quantum theories, although he remained skeptical of their feasibility. His work predicted many later discoveries, including the neutron, meson, and sound neutron. Oppenheimer also made important contributions to theoretical studies on cosmic ray exposure, and began work that would later lead to the description of quantum tunneling. Additionally, there were countless projects and scientific studies across various fields that Oppenheimer conducted throughout his life. Yet people would never remember him for those great scientific contributions, but always for this. Let's return to the mid-20th century during the height of World War II. On October 6, 1939, a letter was delivered to the desk of US President Franklin Delano Roosevelt. This letter warned that Nazi Germany had made breakthroughs in nuclear research, which could result in what the letter described as a new type of bomb with extraordinary destructive power. At the end of the letter was signed, "Sincerely, Albert Einstein." Of course, Einstein was not a spy, but he had several friends who had been closely monitoring the developments. In December 1938, two German scientists accidentally discovered that uranium atoms could be split into two radioactive fragments. Later, two American scientists, Enrico Fermi and Leo Szilard, believed that the German discovery could be used to build an atomic bomb more powerful than anything the world had ever seen. Fermi and Szilard began developing a nuclear reactor of their own, supported solely by resources from Columbia University. However, a news article made Szilard extremely anxious. Germany seized uranium mines in Czechoslovakia and simultaneously prohibited the Czech government from selling uranium to anyone but Nazi Germany. Even more alarming, Szilard discovered that the Nazis were attempting to build an atomic bomb of their own. But at the time, Szilard believed he wasn't influential enough to convince the president. He needed a more reputable name. Szilard arranged a meeting with Einstein, shared his concerns, and persuaded Einstein to sign a letter addressed to the president. He then handed the letter to Alexander Sachs, an economic and scientific advisor who was also a friend of President Roosevelt, to ensure the letter wouldn't be lost or ignored. Eventually, President Roosevelt met with Sachs. After their conversation, the president struggled to grasp the full implications of the issue and simply concluded with a statement. Einstein's job is to see that the Nazis don't blow us up. Roosevelt then called in Major General and senior aide Edwin F. Watson, handed him the letter, and ordered the launch of a project that would later be codenamed the Manhattan Project. "This needs action," the president declared. In 1939, the US established the necessary agencies to begin implementing the Manhattan Project, starting with the Advisory Committee on Uranium. Based on the committee's research, the US government began funding the work of two scientists, Enrico Fermi and Leo Szilard, at Columbia University. Their research focused on isotope separation, also known as uranium enrichment, and a chain of nuclear reactions. After the Manhattan Project officially began, in May 1942, the chairman of the National Defense Research Committee, who had once taught Oppenheimer while at Harvard, invited him to work on fast neutron calculations, a task Oppenheimer excelled at. He was soon nicknamed the coordinator of rapid rupture, a reference to the spread of fast neutron chain reactions in an atomic bomb by his colleagues. At this point, Oppenheimer had joined the project, but he was not yet a key figure, or someone whose leadership would decide its success or failure. In June 1942, the US Army established the Manhattan Engineer District to oversee work related to the atomic bomb project, starting with transferring responsibility from the Office of Scientific Research and Development to the military. Oppenheimer's role changed once this man, General Leslie Groves, was appointed to lead the program, now known as the Manhattan Project. Groves selected Oppenheimer to lead the secret weapons laboratory for the project, a choice that surprised many. Oppenheimer was not politically aligned with the conservative factions, nor had he ever led a major project before. In fact, Groves himself had concerns about his decision. After all, Oppenheimer hadn't won a Nobel Prize. How could he possibly command the respect of others? However, Groves was impressed by Oppenheimer's grasp of the practical aspects of bomb design and construction, as well as his broad scientific knowledge. As a military engineer, Groves understood that such traits were essential in a multidisciplinary field involving not only physics, but also chemistry, metallurgy, ballistics, and engineering. Groves also saw in Oppenheimer something others didn't, an overwhelming ambition, which he believed would drive the project to success. Many have called this appointment Groves' most brilliant move, from a man not usually known for brilliance. At that time, the US wasn't the only nation pursuing an atomic bomb program. In the UK, two German-born British scientists, Rudolf Peierls and Otto Frisch, were tirelessly working to beat their fellow Germans in the race to build the atomic bomb. Oppenheimer and Groves decided that for the sake of security and coordination, they needed a centralized secret laboratory. A remote location was ideal. During their site search in late 1942, Oppenheimer was drawn to New Mexico, not far from his own ranch. After several site visits and evaluations, the final choice was a private boys' school known as the Los Alamos Ranch School. To ensure secrecy, the Los Alamos Laboratory was constructed on the school's grounds. The school buildings were repurposed, and a series of new facilities was quickly erected. Here, Oppenheimer assembled a group of the top physicists of the era, whom he called the brightest stars. At Los Alamos, security was tightened. Even the scientists whose letters had helped initiate the Manhattan Project, such as Albert Einstein and Leo Szilard, were barred from entering. Szilard was allowed to access the Los Alamos research site only a few times. Some groups worked to obstruct and minimize Szilard's role. He was a German citizen and a staunch pacifist. That made Szilard deeply concerned. These groups repeatedly requested that Szilard be removed from the research team. When these requests were denied, the FBI began to monitor Szilard's activities at all times. Einstein was also excluded from the project. The US military deemed him unfit to handle top-secret matters related to national defense. A military report noted that Professor Einstein was considered an extreme left-wing radical and had connections to communist activities. Even the press was banned from reporting on anything, even general nuclear science. Initially, Oppenheimer struggled with organizing teams, but he quickly mastered the art of large-scale management after he decided to live on-site with the unit. He became known for his ability to understand every scientific aspect of the project and for managing inevitable cultural clashes between the scientists and the military. As a scientific leader, he became an inspirational figure to his fellow scientists, almost a symbol of what they were striving to achieve. Oppenheimer led the research, both theoretical and experimental, in the truest sense of the words. His ability to grasp the core of any topic with frightening speed was a decisive factor. He could quickly familiarize himself with the essential details of every aspect of the work. Oppenheimer never led from a command room. He was present at every critical step, in the lab, in the seminar room where new effects were analyzed, and even where new ideas were born. He wasn't the one to contribute many ideas or suggestions himself. Oppenheimer's real influence came in other forms. His intense, continuous presence created a sense of direct engagement among all his colleagues. It created a unique atmosphere, full of enthusiasm and challenge, that permeated the entire duration of the project. After 6 years of laboratory research, the Manhattan Project scientists finally created what they believed to be an effective nuclear weapon. And now it was time to test it. On July 16, 1945, a nuclear bomb named Gadget was transported to the desert of Jornada del Muerto, about 35 miles southeast of the small town of Socorro, New Mexico. To prevent unexpected incidents, the bomb was placed inside a vessel made of 210 tons of steel with walls nearly 36 centimeters thick. If the test failed, Groves and Oppenheimer believed they could safely recover the plutonium inside the containment vessel. When detonated, gadget had the destructive force of 20,000 tons of TNT. It formed a giant fireball and a mushroom cloud reaching over 12 kilometers high. The result far exceeded the expectations of the scientific team, ushering in the atomic age, as project director Robert Oppenheimer put it. The world would never be the same. Less than a month after the test, the bomb was used in war. On August 6, 1945, the atomic bomb Little Boy was dropped on Hiroshima. 3 days later, the second atomic bomb, Fat Man, was dropped on the city of Nagasaki, Japan. For Groves, the bombings of Japan were a victory, but not everyone saw it that way. Among the scientists involved in the Manhattan Project, many later regretted what they had done, including Oppenheimer. The atomic bomb, he said, made the world a worse place. During the Cold War, he actively worked to end the arms race for the sake of peace. His activism grew so strong that he was brought before the House Un-American Activities Committee and accused of being a communist sympathizer. One thing is certain: the Manhattan Project changed the world forever. In 1949, Soviet scientists, using captured data, developed an atomic bomb modeled after the one dropped on Nagasaki. After World War II, the US established the Atomic Energy Commission to oversee efforts to apply the technologies developed under the Manhattan Project to other fields. Finally, in 1964, US President Lyndon B. Johnson ended the era of exclusive government control over nuclear energy by allowing private ownership of such materials. Since then, nuclear fission technology, perfected by Manhattan Project scientists, has served as the foundation for nuclear reactors, power plants, and other technological innovations. Among the most prominent applications are in medical imaging diagnostics, such as magnetic resonance imaging, MRI machines, as well as radiation therapy methods for various types of cancer. As of today, there are a total of 9 countries believed to possess their own nuclear weapons. Yet among these 9 names, we don't see the presence of Germany. Isn't that rather strange? Wasn't it Germany that initially led the race? The very reason why the US launched the Manhattan Project without delay. So, what prevented Germany from acquiring nuclear weapons? Let's go back to World War II, when German scientists began constructing the world's first experimental nuclear reactor. However, despite their efforts to develop such weapons, their program failed to achieve the desired success, even though they were the ones who discovered the catalyst for future nuclear fission research. As early as 1939, intelligence reports confirmed that the Germans were leading the race in atomic bomb research. Germany was the birthplace of nuclear fission studies, when, for the first time, scientists Otto Hahn and Fritz Strassmann successfully split an atom in 1938. Though Hitler's racial purges caused Germany to lose many top Jewish scientists, they still retained a powerful force of talented researchers. After occupying Czechoslovakia in 1939, the Germans seized uranium mines in the region of Göttingen. Expansion campaigns across Western Europe further enabled Hitler to obtain several hundred tons of uranium ore in France, the only heavy water plant in the world at the time, located in Norway, as well as particle accelerators in France. These systems were critical for the creation of nuclear weapons. Even Germany itself hadn't developed such facilities domestically. Despite numerous technical challenges, Germany managed to build a nuclear reactor in Berlin, installing it in a factory near Thurgau, and accumulated sufficient plutonium for potential bomb production. In response to these risks, the Allies launched an extensive and prolonged campaign to prevent Hitler's nuclear program from succeeding. In November 1942, a special forces team deployed by glider was sent to destroy the heavy water plant in Norway. Although the mission wasn't entirely successful, it inflicted significant damage on the Nazi efforts. The British even compiled a list of targets related to Germany's nuclear program to seize attack opportunities. By the end of 1943, British forces used incendiary bombs to burn down the uranium enrichment plant, Der Guss. In September 1944, a ferry carrying heavy water from Norway to Germany was sunk. However, analysts believe that the main reason for Hitler's lagging behind in the nuclear arms race, despite an early start, stemmed from his own policies and mismanagement. One of the physicists involved in Germany's nuclear program was theoretical expert Werner Heisenberg, the pioneer of quantum mechanics and recipient of the Nobel Prize in Physics. Unlike American scientists who participated under unified leadership by Oppenheimer and General Leslie Groves, German nuclear specialists were split into 3 separate groups, conducting isolated experiments. These groups were codenamed after the cities housing their research centers, Berlin, Gotha, and Leipzig. Despite starting 12 years earlier, their research pace toward building a functioning nuclear reactor was significantly slower. The main reasons were fierce competition for already limited resources, intense rivalry between research groups, and ineffective leadership. In the winter of 1944, as Allied forces advanced into Germany, Heisenberg and his colleagues desperately attempted to achieve critical mass in their reactor. The Germans feared Berlin would lose the war, but they still hoped to salvage scientific prestige through a successful nuclear chain reaction. It's worth noting that at that time, the Germans still didn't know about the major breakthroughs achieved by the Manhattan Project. Heisenberg's team relocated to the south and gathered in a secret cave beneath a castle in the town of Haigerloch. There, they conducted one final experiment, codenamed B8. The German Nobel laureate described this test in detail in his nuclear physics book published in 1953. They assembled a total of 664 uranium cubes suspended on air cables and immersed them in a heavy water tank lined with graphite walls. Despite this being a significant step forward, German scientists still couldn't maintain sufficient progress. To help visualize this, let me show you this. This is one of the uranium cubes displayed at the University of Maryland in 2013. This is a uranium cube, each side measuring 5 centimeters in length and weighing 2.2 kilograms. It was also one of the materials used in Nazi Germany's experiments. Studies show that these were merely initial steps, early successes by German scientists at that time. Germany was not actually close to acquiring nuclear weapons. Specifically, gamma spectroscopy results showed that the isotope composition of the cube was similar to that of natural uranium, neither enriched nor depleted. The cube had not reached critical mass and did not contain fission byproducts like cesium-137. But how did the Americans get their hands on this? The answer is simple: because they were the victors. In 1944, as Allied forces advanced into territories previously held by Nazi Germany, General Leslie Groves launched a classified mission named ALSOS to gather intelligence on Germany's scientific research programs. However, the US was most interested in the uranium project. One key figure who directly led and participated in this mission was Samuel Goudsmit, who later founded the scientific journal Physical Review Letters. In late April 1945, the ALSOS team arrived in Hechingen. German physicists there, including Heisenberg, were captured and interrogated. Through this, the Americans learned that as Allied troops approached southern Germany, Nazi forces hastily dismantled the test reactor, buried uranium cubes in nearby fields, and hid heavy water in barrels stored inside bathrooms. As a result, 659 uranium cubes were unearthed, along with the heavy water, and transported to Paris, then sent to the United States. One major purpose of this decision was to prevent the Soviet Union from using these materials in their own nuclear weapons program. Contrary to early assumptions that German scientists had failed to build a working nuclear reactor due to a lack of uranium, recently declassified documents revealed that Nazi Germany actually possessed more uranium cubes than previously believed. Had they concentrated just 50% more uranium into their test reactor, Germany might have achieved critical mass. The main reason behind Hitler's failure was his dispersal of resources instead of uniting them. Fortunately, Nazi Germany did not consolidate enough uranium, as Heisenberg had requested. Despite American efforts, some uranium cubes were smuggled into the black market and eventually ended up in the Soviet Union. A few were secretly transported to the US as well, landing in the hands of private collectors, including Robert Ninninger, who was in charge of asset management for the Manhattan district, where the uranium had been delivered from Europe. Today, we still live in the age of nuclear weapons. We don't know when it will come to an end, but I'm certain that will also mark the end of the world. What's your view on Oppenheimer and nuclear weapons? Humanity's most powerful invention. Hopefully, they'll think twice before pressing any detonation button. Thank you to all the viewers for staying with us today. We'll see each other again soon at this time slot. I'm Eddie from Facts 360 TV. Goodbye and have a great day.